Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Rosh Hashana Daf is about the establishment of the new month, when we determine what day Rosh Chodesh is and how long the ending month has been. Is it a 29-day month and Rosh Chodesh is on the 30th day, which is actually the first of the next month? Or is it a 30-day month and Rosh Chodesh is actually the 31st day, which is the first of the next month? As we've seen, the reason for this calculation is that the length of the month is based on the cycle of the moon, which is 29 and a half days. And therefore, the months, which can't be half days, have to range from 29 days to 30 days in order to make up the difference. Generally, we establish, at least in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, we establish the month based on sighting the new moon. The Gemara here is discussing if the month of Adar could ever be a 30-day month, or it always has to be a 29-day month. The Gemara has quoted some discussion on it. The Gemara will finish that sugya by bringing a proof to it and then rejecting the proof and then having a final proof with a conclusion. The Gemara's second sugya for the daf will be about whether it's possible for us to fool around with the length of the month, or are we restricted to when the moon is seen or not seen? Can we change the length of the month at will based on what we need it for the calculations of the rest of the year? And then Gemara's third sugya will be, when does the new moon actually begin from an astronomical perspective, and what can we use that information? Can we use that information to figure out when witnesses who claim they saw the moon must be either lying or mistaken based on what we know must be the actual time that the moon appeared? So let's begin. The Gemara is discussing, is Adar a 29-day month fixed, or could it vary? So the Gemara has brought one version of a proof and rejected it. The Gemara is now bringing another version of the same discussion, and the Gemara brings something from Rav Nachman. He points out that the halacha is that you're allowed to tell witnesses, the witnesses who've seen the new moon are allowed to violate Shabbos, travel outside the Tchum in order to come to the Beis Hamikdash or to come to the Beis Din to tell us that they saw the new moon and we should establish the new month. Now, generally this would happen if it was the 30th day of the month and they saw the new moon. That would have to be the evening before. You can only see the moon at night, so it would be the evening after the 29th before the 30th, and they're going to come on that night. And they're allowed to be Machal Shabbos. It means even if it's a Friday night, they're allowed to come on Friday night to tell us that we saw the new moon, and tomorrow Shabbos is going to be Rosh Chodesh. It won't be day 30 of the month of Adar or any other month. Now, when are they allowed to travel on Shabbos to do this? So up till now we've been saying that you're only allowed to do that in the month of Tishrei or in the month of Nisan in order to make sure we get the Yom Tov correct for the Yom Tov of Pesach in the month of Nisan and all the Yom Tovim in the month of Tishrei. So now the Gemara says that there's two potential reasons why we would want to make sure that those witnesses travel even on Shabbos. One would be because we want to make sure we get the date correct, and that would be very important. Another one would be maybe we just want to have witnesses have testified before we declare the new month. It's mitzvah l'kadesh al pi re'iyah. We want to declare the month based on a testimony, not based on our own calculations or based on what we have to do. So according to this version of the Gemara, Rav Nachman assumes that the reason we want witnesses to come is in order for us to be able to declare the month based on witnesses. Mitzvah l'kadesh al pi re'iyah. We want to have witnesses have said that they saw the new moon before we declare the new month. So now the Gemara says as follows. If the month of Adar is always a 29-day month, that means we're always going to declare the 30th day to be Rosh Chodesh, we need those witnesses to come and travel Friday night, because they have to come tell us that they saw it. We're going to have to declare the next day to be Rosh Chodesh, and we want to have witnesses testify before that. So we tell them travel on Friday night, even if it is Shabbos, so that we are able to declare it, which we have to do the next day, because Adar is always 29 days. Now, if, however, it could sometimes be 30 days and sometimes 29 days, so then why do we have to tell them to travel on Rosh Chodesh? If they saw it, why do we have to tell them to travel on Shabbos? If they saw it earlier, they'll come in and tell us. If they didn't see it, so then we won't declare Rosh Chodesh until day 31. And then they'll come after Shabbos. They'll come on Matzah Shabbos. They saw it Matzah Shabbos tonight. They'll come tell us then. Or maybe they'll come Matzah Shabbos, and they'll tell us, listen, we saw it Friday night, so then we'll say, oh, okay, that's great. That means that Shabbos was actually Rosh Chodesh. Either way, we're not going to declare the new month until they come and report to us what they saw. So, if the whole reason, and again, we're not just assuming that the reason we want them to travel is so that we have edus, we have testimony before we declare the month. So then it doesn't make sense why we would tell them to be Machal Shabbos if we're only going to declare it based on what we find out, and it could be sometimes be a 30-day month and sometimes a 29-day month. What must be, says Rav Nachman, it must be that it has to be a 29-day month, and therefore we need them to come Friday night, because if they don't come Friday night, we're going to declare Shabbos, which is day 30, we're going to declare Shabbos as Rosh Chodesh anyway. Therefore we want to make sure that they come Friday night, so we tell them travel even on a Friday night. So Gemara says, not necessarily. It could be that what's going on here is that really day 30 is Friday and day 31 is Shabbos. And therefore, if they don't come Friday night, we're going to have to declare Rosh Chodesh on Shabbos before they come. So you're right. It's mitzvah l'kadosh al pi re'iyah. The only reason we want them to come is to make sure that they come before we declare Rosh Chodesh, because we want to declare it based on witnesses. But Shabbos is day 31, and if they don't come Friday night, we're going to have to declare it on day 31, even though it could be that it's a 30-day month. If it would be a 29-day month, fine, we'll declare it on Shabbos, which is, we'll declare it on Friday, which is day 30. No problem. But if it's a 30-day month, then they won't see the moon until Friday night. We want them to come in order for us to be able to have witnesses there before we actually declare it. So we don't have a proof from this discussion as to whether there could be 30 days or not. It could really be that it's only 29 days always, or it could be that it's 30 days. Either way, it makes sense that we want the witnesses to come even on Shabbos. But now the Gemara has another proof, and this one is conclusive. The Gemara says there's a brisa that says that in the times when the Beis Hamikdash was up, and we were Makadosh the Chodesh based on witnesses, we would let them be Machal Shabbos to come on Friday night for any month. And that's because we were bringing Karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash on Rosh Chodesh, and we wanted to make sure to get the Karbanos right. We wanted to get the day right. We wanted to have the right time. We didn't want to declare retroactively that yesterday was really Rosh Chodesh afterwards. And so therefore we told them, come on the 29th at night, even if it's Friday night, if you see the moon. Now, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, there was still a small period in which they were Makadosh the Chodesh al pi re'iyah, where they had witnesses come, but there was no Karbanos anymore. So then it didn't matter what the day was. It only mattered, then it didn't matter what day was Rosh Chodesh. It didn't change any halacha. It only made a difference for Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Chodesh Tishrei. So then only those 2 months were they able to be Machal Shabbos and come if they saw the moon Friday night. So Gemara says, you see here clearly that the reason we wanted them to come is not because it was a mitzvah. Not because mitzvah kadosh al pi re'iyah. The reason why we want them to come Friday night is because otherwise we would get the day wrong. So that proves that Adar has to vary. Because if Adar was always 29 days, I don't need the witnesses to come be Machal Shabbos to tell me that. I know it's 29 days every year. Again, the reason can't be al pi re'iyah. The reason it has to be because we need to get the day right. But then Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we don't have any problem getting the day right because Adar is always 29 days. Must be Adar could have been 30 days, and that's why that had to be Machal Shabbos to come. Otherwise, I would end up with the wrong date. Okay, now the Gemara's next discussion is about, can we purposely change the date? Can we make it a 29-day month even if the moon is not seen until the 30th? Can we make it a 30-day month even if the moon is seen on the 29th because of other considerations? So the Gemara quotes the following incident. The Gemara says, Ul came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and he says, you Babylonian people don't even know what a great chesed we did for you in Eretz Yisrael, that we made this into a 30-day month. We extended the month. So Gemara says, and it was the month of El that they extended. They made El into a 30-day month, which means they pushed off Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot another extra day. So Gemara says, what was the big chesed? The Gemara says it's a machlokes between Ula and Rav Acha Bar Chanina what the big chesed was. They both agree that they don't want to have a Yom Tov and a Shabbos together. According to Ula, the reason is because the vegetables will go off. Now you can't pick vegetables on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. So any vegetables that you picked before Shabbos or before Yom Tov, if 2 days are together and you can't eat them until 2 days later, they'll be ruined and you have to pick new ones. And therefore that's a chesed. According to Rav Acha Bar Chanina, it's because if somebody were to die on one of those 2 days, you wouldn't be able to bury him for 2 full days, and therefore it's a chesed that you don't have 2 days together. And that's why we made sure we don't have Shabbos next Yom Tov, and that's why they pushed off. So the Gemara wants to know, what's the difference between the two? They both have very valid reasons. What kind of machlokas is this? There's 2 reasons. What's the issue? So the Gemara says, no, there are cases when one of these considerations applies, and the other consideration does not apply. So, for example, as far as the vegetables going off, that doesn't apply for Shabbos that is on a Friday, for Shabbos that is Erev Yom Kippur, for when Yom Kippur is on a Sunday. Because vegetables which you picked on Friday, you'll eat in Shabbos, and you don't need any vegetables for Yom Kippur. So, you won't need vegetables until after Yom Kippur. Whatever you ate Shabbos, you'll eat Shabbos. And that's it. You'll get new ones after Yom Kippur. What's the problem? It's not like you need them for Yom Kippur itself. Yom Tov, you would need them, fine, but Yom Kippur, you're not going to need them. So that strategy, that svara, that reasoning would not apply. The only reason that would apply would be because of the dead people. And one of the dead people doesn't apply when it's Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov, you're allowed to get a guy to bury somebody who died. There's a special leniency that's allowed for the sake of the honor of the dead to get a guy to bury him. So the Gemara says, but this still doesn't explain what the point of this machlokas is, because each one should hold of the other's reason, both a valid reason. How's there an argument here? Okay, your reason doesn't apply, the other reason applies. What exactly is the discussion? So the Gemara says, no, because they do argue, because there is a potential way around the vegetable problem, and that is you could freshen it up by putting it into hot water. So you can put it into hot water, so that's an argument. Does that count as something that you could do to avoid the issue? And if the only problem was the vegetables, if that was our main concern, so one says it's not such a big deal because of you could always freshen it up, and the other one says no, you can't freshen it up. That's not a solution, and therefore, in a case where the only problem is the vegetables, you would get around it. You would not be able to get around it. While the other one says, oh, you're fine, you can get around it, not an issue. Okay, now the Gemara says, is it true though that you could push off Rosh Chodesh in order to change the date so that you don't have Shabbos and Yom Tov together? The Gemara says, it would seem to be that that's not correct, because we have a Brisa quoted by Rabbi Bar Shmuel that has a lima that you're not allowed to do that. Where do you see that? So he says as follows: you do change the length of the year based on need, based on needing to keep certain Yom Tovim or certain events in certain times of the year and certain seasons. But to change the month based on need, you can't do that. You have to follow the moon. And that's learned from the pasuk that says, "Chodesh hazeh lachem rosh chadashim," which we have a drasha, hazeh. It has to be hazeh ra'eh v'kadesh. You have to see it, know it, see the moon, and only then can you establish it. You cannot change something based on your own needs. The Gemara gives 2 basic approaches over here. The Gemara says there's 2 types of ways of changing the month length. You could make a full month shorter, or you can make a short month longer. What this is telling you is kazeh re'eh v'kadesh. If you want to make a short month, you have to have seen the moon. You cannot make a short month if you hadn't seen the moon. You cannot shorten a month that should be longer. What you could do though is see the moon and ignore it, and you could say, okay, the moon's up, but I'm going to make a longer month anyway because I need to push off Yom Tov a day. That you're allowed to do. So Kazeh Re'eh v'Kadesh says, and it only has to be, you're only allowed to Kadesh, you're only allowed to make the new month in a situation where you've already seen the moon. Otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to. Says the Gemara that this fits with a brisa that we've seen, where it says that you threaten the witnesses, meaning to say you try to convince them that if they claim that they saw the moon, that they didn't really see it. And that's because we say, listen, you saw the moon, I'm glad you saw the moon, but we need to make this into a full month, and therefore we're going to ignore you, or try to convince you that you didn't see it, in order to make the month longer. However, to make witnesses lie the other way, and to try to say that they saw the moon, even if they did not, in order to shorten the month, that you can't do. So the Gemara says that actually doesn't fit with a different version of that, where we said that Rav Yehuda Nesiya center of Ami, and he said in Rav Yochanan, and he taught us that you're allowed to shorten the month. You threaten the witnesses, or the way the Rishonim explain it is that you try to convince them that they actually saw the moon, even if they're trying to back out. They thought they saw the moon, and trying to back out, and you tell them, no, you really saw it. because we try to encourage them to stick to their testimony that they saw it. If we need to make the month to be shorter in order to keep Yontif a day earlier. So we do stress that. So that's different than what we said before. So Gemara says it's not a contradiction. Nisan and Tishrei, we're allowed to try to make the month shorter. We're allowed to try to make Rosh Chodesh earlier because we need to keep Yontif away from Shabbos. The other months, then you're not. You're not allowed to try to make the day shorter. You're allowed to try to make it longer, maybe, but you're not allowed to try to make it longer. So now the Gemara says that the approach, which we've seen earlier, where we said that you're not allowed to mess with it at all, not longer or shorter, there is such an opinion. It's the opinion of a Chayrim, based on a brisa which we've seen quoted earlier in the Masechta. Chayrim say that every month is either 29 days or 30 days, and it alternates in a fixed rotation, so that it's 29, 30, 29, 36 months of each, and therefore the length of the year is always going to be exactly 354 days. You cannot fool around with it based on what you want. The way that this opinion of Chaim expresses this is that it says that every Yom Tov is always 4 days later in the week than it was last year. So if Shavuos was on a Sunday, then next year Shavuos will be on a Wednesday. And the reason for that is that there's always 354 days in the year. 350 is divisible by 7 exactly, so that would be 350 days later would be the same day of the week. 4 days after that, which is a complete year, will be 4 days later in the week. So Gemara points out, and the Brisa continues that if it's a leap year, so then you have one more day. And a leap year, the leap month is always going to be 29 days, so you'll have one extra day. Again, 28 is divisible by 7, so 29 days will push off the calculation by one more day in the week. Then the Yontif will be 5 days later in the week than it was the preceding year. Okay. Now, the Gemara brings a different version of what we said as to when you're allowed to, as to whether you're allowed to make it longer or shorter. Before we had said you're allowed to make it longer, but you can't make it shorter. Versus now there's a different version that says you're allowed to make it shorter, but you can't make it longer. What would the reason behind that be? Because if you want to make it shorter, that means that you didn't see the moon and you'd be Makadosh Chodesh anyway. That is not really a problem. Nobody's going to know that you made that move. The Beis Din will not look silly because people will just say, look, I didn't see the moon. Maybe somebody else must have seen the moon, and the Beis Din know what they're doing. If, however, you take a shorter month, that means that the moon was seen on the eve of the 29th, and you want to ignore that testimony in order to fix up the calendar, well, people have seen the moon, and you're going to go ahead and not be Makadosh Chodesh. Beis Din will look silly because people have seen it, and the new month is not declared that day anyway. It'll look like a falsehood and like you're fooling around. Okay, now the Gemara goes into its next sugya, which is the calculations of the moled. So let's just explain how the rotation of the moon and the moled works. The moon completes a full cycle of growing and shrinking in 29 and a half days. That cycle is based on its rotation around the earth. It takes it 29 and a half days to do a complete loop around the earth. Now that rotation brings it closer to the sun, to the earth, to the sun side of the earth, and it brings it further away to the far side of the earth from the sun. Now, the light of the moon is only caused by the sun shining on it. The only part of the moon you can see is the part that's lit up by the sun. So when the moon is on the same side of earth as the sun, the side of the moon that's being lit up is facing away from earth, it's facing the sun. When it's on the other far side of earth from the sun, then the side of the moon that's being lit up by the sun is visible to earth. So when it's a full moon is when the moon is furthest from the sun. It's the opposite side of earth from the sun, and that we can see the entire moon. When the moon is closest to the sun, we can't see any of it. Now, as it moves around, more and more and more of as it moves away from the sun, more of the moon is visible, more of the lighted, sunlit part of the moon is facing earth, and we can see it. Once it gets to being a full moon, it begins moving closer to the sun, and the angle is such that the lighted part of the moon becomes less and less visible to earth. At some moment, it passes right near sun, and it doesn't block the sun, because although the longitude is the same as the sun, the latitude is different. It doesn't block the sun, but it does pass right near it, and then there's a moment when a little bit of it was visible, and then it's blocked. It's not blocked, but the entire lit side is facing away from us, and then it moves a little past that, and again the lit side again appears. That's the moment of the birth of the moon. That's the molad. That's when the old moon ends and a new moon begins. So the Gemara tells us that period, the moon is not visible. That exchange. So at the moment when the entire side is facing away, you can't see the moon at all. Close to that time also you can't see it, because the sliver of moon that's lit is so small that it's not visible in the sky, particularly since this happens during the day, and therefore there's nothing you can see. It all has to happen during the day because the sun and the moon are right near each other. So that means that wherever that's happening, it's happening during the day. If you're in the part of the earth which is lit by the sun, then that's where this moon-sun transition happens. You can't see it because the sun is right near the moon, and therefore it's overwhelming its light. If you're on the other side of the earth, where it's nighttime, you don't see it anyway, because the moon is not risen, it's not in the sky, it's on the opposite side of earth from you. So the period in which it's totally invisible, the Gemara says, is 6 hours. 6 hours before and 6 hours after. That's 12 hours. It's got to be that amount. 6 hours before, it's too small to be seen. 6 hours after, it's too small to be seen. After that, it can start appearing. Now, the Gemara says that in some places, it'll be not visible for 18 hours. The question is, though, is it 18 hours before the molad, so the last 18 hours of the old moon you can't see? Or is it 18 hours after the molad and the first 18 hours of the new moon you can't see? So there's many different, so what the Gemara says is that depends if you're in Bavel or you're in Eretz Yisrael. There's different understandings in the Rishonim as to what that means. We'll go with the Pshat that works as follows. In Bavel is to the east of Eretz Yisrael. If that moment happens, that moment when the new moon is born, if that moment happens around Chatzos time in Eretz Yisrael, midday, and 6 hours later is when the moon would first become visible. So in Eretz Yisrael, that would be just before sunset, and therefore the sun would that would be just after sunset, and the sun will have already set, and the moon is on its way to set, because the moon is just behind the sun at that point. It's near the sun, but it's just behind it. At that point, the moon will be visible, because it hasn't set yet, and the sun already has set, so the light of the sun is not drowning out its light, and therefore you could see it. In Bavel, though, which is further east, it's already set. So the moment when you have 6 hours after the birth of the moon, when the moon first becomes visible, it's not visible to the people in Bavel anymore, because it's already below the horizon. It's already set. Therefore, they'll have to wait 18 hours until after the birth of the moon to see it when it comes up the next morning. Now, if you are the other way, in Eretz Yisrael, so then the last 18 hours of the old moon is visible. And that's because, I should say, the last 18 hours of the old moon are not visible. And that's because, as the moon is ending, it's to the east of the sun, and therefore it rises just before the sun, and therefore you won't be able to see it. It'll be drowned by the light of the sun, because it has already risen. The only time you'll be able to, the last time you'll be able to see the old moon will be 18 hours earlier. It's be 18 hours before the birth of the moon. That would be 6 hours before is the latest time it's visible at all, and 12 hours before that would be the previous night. Because only then is it far enough away from the sun that it's still visible. This is how the Gemara explains it. Now, the Gemara also says here that Shmuel said that I'm so familiar with the ways of the sun and the moon that I could calculate the days of Rosh Chodesh for everybody far away from Eretz Yisrael, and they'll know it fully. They don't need to hear about it. I could tell them when it's going to be. The Gemara says that Abba, the father of Rabbi Simlai, said, do you know, was statement in the Brisa called Soda Ibor, which is a list of times and calculations of the cycles of the moon. Do you know what it says there? There's a line there that says that it makes a difference if the moon is before Chatzos, if the Molid is before Chatzos or after Chatzos. Do you know what that means? Shmuel said he admits he doesn't know what that means. He said, if you don't know what that means, there's probably a lot of things that you don't know about it, so we couldn't trust that. The Gemara says that the explanation of what that means was brought by Rabbi Zeira, and he said that since it's 6 hours of invisibility before or after, so on a day which is 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of darkness, the days of the equinox, the sun will set at exactly 6 hours after Chatzos. So it makes a difference if the Molid is before Chatzos or after Chatzos. Because if the Molid is after Chatzos, and somebody comes, that's the midday, and somebody comes and he says he saw it that night, he's got to be lying, because it doesn't appear, it's not visible until 6 hours afterwards. And 6 hours afterwards is already too late to see it, it's already set. So if the Molid is only after Chatzos, it will not appear that day, and somebody comes and says he saw it, is lying. If, however, the Molid is before Chatzos, then the 6 hour period of invisibility ends before sunset and moonset, and therefore it is possible to be seen just after the sun has set, when the moon is on its way down and hasn't set yet. Now, Rabbi Zeira said another halacha. He said that in Judaism, in our calendar, the day follows the night. Beginning of the calendar date is with sunset, just like Shabbos begins with sunset, and the day that follows is part of that day. Therefore, if you see the old moon on the evening following the 29th of the month, you still see the old moon. That means that the day which is coming is part of that old month. It's got to be. You still see the old moon. Therefore, you cannot possibly declare that day to be Rosh Chodesh, because the night is the beginning of the 30th day, and the old moon is still up. Therefore, the 30th day has to be still part of the old month. So Gemara says, how do you know this halacha that the night follows the day? Gemara brings the machlokes what the source is. One is that the Torah says about Yom Kippur, it says me erev ad erev, from evening until evening. That shows that Yom Kippur begins in evening and ends the next evening. Rish Lakish says it's from the description of eating matzah on Pesach. It says ad yom echad v'esem chodesh ba'erev. You should eat matzah, meaning you should not eat chametz until the 21st day at evening. So you see, evening of the 21st is when the Pesach Yontif ends. What's the difference between the two positions? Gemara says the difference is it in the beginning of the evening by sunset, or is it later in the evening? If it says evening till evening, that's the beginning of the evening. Beginning of the evening, when the sun first goes down, is when the new day begins. If it's talking about by Pesach, though, it can't mean the beginning of the evening, because this pasuk is talking about optional matzah eating. But the first night of Pesach was not optional. The first night of Pesach, you have to eat matzah. So it couldn't be talking about that day. It's got to be talking about after that evening ends. And therefore it's talking about the end of the evening to the end of the evening. That would mean that the middle of the evening itself, or at least the first half of the evening, doesn't count. Any time where the mitzvah of matzah eating is over doesn't count. It's not part of the new day. That would mean that the day begins after Chatzos Halayla. So that would be a difference between Reish Lakish's approach and Rabbi Zeira's approach. So the Gemara brings another halacha here that Rabbi Zeira says, well, whenever we're not sure what day Yontif is, we do Sfeik Yom, we do an extra day, it's day 15 and day 16. We don't have any possibility that it's day 14 and day 15. Meaning, based on our knowledge of what a 29-day month would give us day 15, so we say, well, listen, maybe it was a 30-day month, and therefore day 15 is what we actually are counting as day 16. We don't do the opposite, because it can't be 28-day month. It says, what do you mean? Maybe the month before was 29 days, and this month is also 29 days, and therefore it all comes out a day earlier, and you don't know about it. Someone says, no, if the preceding month would be 29 days, I would know about it. 2 29-day months in a row I would have heard about, and therefore I would know when the Yom Tov has to be on what I'm now considering to be the 14th of the month. The only issue is it the 15th or the 16th?
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.